There's a lot of talk about the alt-right. The alt-right. I have with me Jared Taylor. He is back. He is the editor of American Renaissance and president of New Century Foundation. He's Skyping with me this morning. Jared, good morning, sir. Welcome back.
It's always a pleasure to be on your program.
Jared, before we get into the alt-right and all that, what's your impression of President Trump so far?
I'm a little bit disappointed. I wish that he had really stuck to his signature issues of deporting all illegals, of really concentrating on building that wall, of getting rid of birthright citizenship, of taking a very hard look at Muslim immigration. I guess he tried that a little bit, but he's gotten distracted now on health care and this foreign interventionism. That to me is especially disappointing.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to put America first and leave us out of these wars in the Middle East, but he seems to have a real itchy trigger finger.
What is causing him? Is it the Rhino Republicans, or what is causing him to be distracted in that way?
As far as health care is concerned, he did campaign on getting rid of Obamacare.
Yeah.
So I suppose that was something that he felt he was committed to do. Now, since that's failed, I don't know how much harder he's going to try and how much time he's going to spend working on that. But the real disappointment is after having given all those great reasons he gave for why Barack Obama should stay out of Syria, then he goes and hauls off and sends 59 cruise missiles himself. Let's hope that's just a one-shot affair, so to speak. But the idea of getting into those quagmires, nation building, as George W. Bush promised he would never do and then got involved in, these are terrible distractions from all the problems we have at home.
I agree. What is the alt-right?
That is a name for a broad dissident movement, and it is against egalitarianism primarily. It's against egalitarianism in the form of assuming that all cultures are equal, that the sexes are basically equivalent and interchangeable, that all religions are equally beautiful, that all people and all races, all cultures, you can all mix them all together and it doesn't matter, that it's just all wonderful. It's this egalitarian orthodoxy that the alt-right rejects. But one of the things that does unite it is an understanding that race is a real phenomenon, that race is biological, not just some sort of sociological optical illusion, and that it's an important part of individual and group identity. I think that's one of the things that really unites the alt-right. And it also recognizes that whites as a group have legitimate interests, just as do every other racial group.
So I have not heard of this term alt-right, not that I remember, until President Trump came on board as president. Has that term been around forever, or is it a new term?
The term was actually coined around 2009, and it was probably first used by Paul Gottfried, who used to teach at Elizabethtown College. And then a fellow named Richard Spencer established a web page of that name, Alternative Right. Then he gave up that website and started doing other things, but now that the term has caught on, he has gotten back to using it and promoting it. But so, no, it only dates back to about 2009, and it reflects the idea that the conservative movement in the United States has lost sight of the things that really matter, and that fighting gay marriage or trying to get prayer back in schools, these things may be important. Libertarianism, small government, all that may be important. But if we let immigration continue to bring in Muslims and third world people, that the country is going to change in ways that make libertarianism or small government, all of these questions largely irrelevant.
So are there like groups of alt-right who disagree with each other on issues, or are they all in agreement on the same thing?
Oh, there's plenty of disagreement. And I would say probably the largest subject of disagreement is that there are many on the alt-right that think that Jews are a destructive force in the United States. Others are much less inclined to blame Jews for what's going on. That would be one area. Another aspect of disagreement of the alt-right is that there are those who are very, very strongly anti-feminist to the point that the feminists would call them misogynists. Other people are less divided on that question. There are various differences also on foreign policy. By and large, the alt-right is very, very non-interventionist and tends to respect and admire Vladimir Putin and his nationalist approach to putting Russia's interests in front before others. They tend to like that as a model for America first, as Donald Trump was talking during the campaign.
When it comes to the feminists, the Jews, and other, where do you stand on those issues? And Russia?
Well, I am not so ferociously anti-feminist. I don't think that white people or people in general advance their own cause by blaming Jews for things that go wrong. I think we have to look to our own resources. We have to look to our own solutions for things. As far as foreign policy is concerned, I generally do think that the alt-right position on respecting nationalism, respecting sovereignty, respecting leaders that really put the interests of their people first, I certainly agree with that. I know that there are certain pre-war connotations to the term America first, but there should be nothing controversial about a president of the United States saying America first. That should be his job.
Yeah.
It's the job of the U.S. president to put our interests before those of any other people on earth. Whereas I think both Republicans and Democrats over the last 20 or 30 years, they seem to think of the United States as this country that is sort of, we're here to serve the world. We're here to spread democracy. We're here to spread gay rights. And we're here to welcome all these people who come from failed societies. And we have an infinite capacity to bring them here and turn them into good little Americans. Both Democrats and Republicans have had this view. And so it's refreshing to have a president who realizes that Americans are a distinct people. And not everybody's necessarily going to fit in.
Yeah.
That's a radical position to take in contemporary America.
I find it interesting, and I've been fighting with black people over the years about this, but I find it interesting that groups get together, or segments of groups get together, and they blame other groups for their failures in life, where in America, you learn from others, but you can also take control of your own life. And I mean, you got to have challenges, of course, but you can pretty much do what you want. And it seemed a waste of time to just build up all this anger against other groups.
I think that is one of the things that most holds black people back in the United States. This conviction that Whitey is out there rubbing his hands, trying to think, how am I going to put black people down today?
Yeah.
White people just don't think in those terms. But the idea of saying to black people, the reason that you are poor or more likely to be in jail, it's because of those white people over there, those teachers, those police officers, those librarians, those mayors, those congressmen. They're all trying to do you in. That's a terrible message to send to black people. And I think that if we as a country had as one of our objectives to make black people hate white people, that'd be the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Tell black people constantly, it's those horrible people over there, past and present, who are responsible for everything that's ever gone wrong for you and will go wrong for you tomorrow. And yet, white people love to wallow in that message. So many white people love to feel good about themselves by talking about how bad white people are. It's a kind of a sickness.
Yeah.
And of course, it feeds the same kind of sickness that many blacks have, that nothing that they do is really their fault. It's all the man who did it to me. It's a sickness that grows on each other. It's a mutual kind of insanity.
I'm starting to see the same thing happening to young white people as well. They're starting to organize together and blame the Jews for whatever's going wrong in their lives. And not only are they blaming, they're starting to become angry about it. And I try to tell them, yes, you have a right to disagree and you have a right to voice your opinion, but to be angry about it is only going to hold you back in life. It's not going to enhance your life in no form or fashion.
Well, I think sometimes in life, if things are really unjust, if there really is evil in the world, it is not illegitimate to be angry about it. But you have to be very, very sure of what you're being angry about. Now, in my view, I think that the current immigration policy we have of welcoming people from all around the world, and the idea that so long as they're...
Jared, hold that thought. I'm sorry to cut you off. Hold that thought. Let me take a quick break. 888-7753-773. Jared, I was saying just before the break that I see younger white Americans, especially men, I don't know if the women are doing it, who are angry at the Jews for something that happened a long time ago. And the anger, there's nothing wrong with learning history, but the anger is what's going to weaken you, as it's done for black people. You can deal with life without being angry about it. As a matter of fact, you see clearer how to deal with it. But you were saying that anger is good.
No, I don't think it's good. Sometimes it's understandable. Sometimes there are explanations for it. For example, young white men, they have, well, at first I was very disdainful of the kind of vituperation that they express. But I've come to understand it a little bit better because all of their lives, they're told that white men are basically the cancer of history.
Yeah.
That it's their fault that everything that's ever gone wrong for Hispanics, for women, for blacks, for homosexuals, colonialism, slavery, lynching, it's all to blame. They're all to blame for all of that. That nothing white people have ever done is any good, and for white people to have any pride in their history or heritage is an expression of hatred. Really, they have pretty much been told that right from the get-go.
I agree.
And once they realize that, well, this isn't really, that they should not be blamed for this, many of them are quite angry about a system that places the blame for everything that's gone wrong in history on their shoulders. There's a certain bitterness about that. And so I understand that, but I agree 100% with you that being motivated by anger can blind you to the realities of things. Yeah. Anger can blind you to the sometimes legitimate points of views that others have. So I'm trying to understand this anger, and I think that's really at the base of it, being told right practically from kindergarten on that they have privileges that are unearned, that they just basically oppress other people by breathing the air. This stuff really makes a lot of young men hopping mad, and it is primarily a young man's experience, but some women are reacting in the same way too.
Yeah. Are you a white nationalist?
I don't use that term. I consider myself a white advocate. By that I mean that whites do have legitimate interests, and that it is perfectly legitimate and moral to advocate in the interests of whites. I think, for example, that whites have the right to remain a majority in the United States. We had an immigration policy until 1965 that was designed to keep the country majority white. So it was mostly whites and blacks. I think adding in this new mix of Hispanics, adding in Asians, adding in people from all around the world, Muslims. Why do we really need Muslims in the United States? The idea is that we cannot discriminate against Muslims because discrimination of any kind is bad.
Yeah.
But I really do not think that Muslims bring anything to the United States but trouble. But to say so gets you pegged as some sort of absolute hater and beyond the pale.
What's wrong with being a white nationalist?
There's nothing wrong with it. The word nationalist to me has a kind of, Basque nationalists or Kurdish nationalists. It has a kind of a bomb-throwing hue to it that I prefer to avoid. But the idea of whites wishing to remain a majority in a nation of their own, I think that's entirely legitimate. The French, for example, why is it wrong to say France should be for the French? Why is it wrong for Hungarians, for example, who are causing a big stink in the European Union? Why is it wrong for them to say, well, now, wait a minute, we really don't want to become a multicultural country. We don't want to admit these Africans and Middle Easterners who are swarming into Europe. We just don't want them here.
Yeah.
I think that's perfectly legitimate. And when you think about, you could ask the Chinese to admit Syrians. You could ask the Japanese to admit Syrians. We wouldn't even think of it because we know they'd turn us down flat. And yet it's only basically European or European origin countries that we expect to open themselves up to that kind of generosity to others who are going to change their society. We would never ask the Nigerians to admit Syrians. We would never ask the Venezuelans, for example, to admit large numbers of Syrian refugees. It's only white countries that we expect to do this, and we consider them somehow wrong if they don't want to.
Why is it that it's only white people who are able to build a great and free nation or country? I don't know of any other race or any other country where the dominant race have been able to do that and everybody want to go there. What is it about white people that other cultures don't seem to have?
Well, I think you're not necessarily correct that only whites have done this. The Japanese, for example, or the Koreans, they have built very successful societies in which there is a kind of democracy, a kind of a freedom. The texture of life in Japan is certainly different from that of the United States, and it reflects, I think, basic cultural and even deeper differences between those groups. But they have built very successful societies, and if they were as open to immigration as the United States and white countries have been, they would be swamped with Pakistanis, with Iraqis, with Afghans who would love to live in a successful, wealthy society like that of Japan or Korea or Taiwan. But why is it that whites have built the kind of societies that they do? I think one aspect of it is a general high average level of intelligence, but even more important perhaps is that there's a general level of trust. To have a society that works well, you don't want people being suspicious of each other. A kind of common expectation that people will behave in an honorable way. That is a great addition to a society. I remember speaking with a good friend of mine who'd lived for years in Brazil. And he was talking about one of the differences between Brazilian society and American society. He says, in the United States, a newspaper company can have one of these boxes and they leave it at the subway station. You put in a quarter, you open the box, and you take your newspaper out. You've seen machines like that.
Yeah.
He said, in Brazil, you could never do that. Somebody would put in a quarter and they'd take all the newspapers out.
Yeah.
Because you just don't have that level of trust. And if you operate on that kind of expectation that there is corruption, it's always sand in the gears. I read a survey result just a few days ago. To my astonishment, it said that 2/3 of Mexicans admit that within the last year they have bribed a police officer. Now, gee, imagine if 2/3 of Americans had bribed a police officer in the last year. What kind of society would this be?
I know.
It would be a hellish place to live if that's just the way people operated year in, year out. So I think the expectation that people will behave honorably, that they are honest, that this large level of trust, that is an essential quality of what has made the West great.
Yeah, I noticed, though, that now that they're allowing so many foreigners to come in, both through the back door and the front door, that type of trust is disappearing as well.
Yes, that's exactly right. There is a Professor Robert Putnam at Harvard who has studied this question very carefully. He was one of these people who believes in this slogan, diversity is our greatest strength, blah, blah, blah. And he was hoping to prove that diversity increases trust. Well, he studied all of these different aspects, different parts of the United States, from very homogeneous South Dakota to places that are as diverse as Los Angeles. And he controlled for every possible thing he could think of: poverty, education, distance to commute, to get to work, all of these things. And he found that diversity is an independent and powerful variable that decreases trust.
Yeah.
But this is normal when you think about it.
Yeah.
People are more comfortable and more likely to trust people who are similar to them, linguistically, religiously, and racially.
Let me take a bottom of the hour break, Jared. We'll come back and we'll finish up right after this break. Jared, do you have a website or anything you want to give out?
Yes, our website is www.amren.com, and it's very active, and we welcome your listeners.
Are you a Christian?
I'm confirmed as a Presbyterian. My father was a Presbyterian missionary in Japan. And gosh, my family is Presbyterian for about as many generations as we can count on your fingers and toes.
So is a Presbyterian the same thing as a Christian?
I beg your pardon?
Is that the same as a Christian, a Presbyterian?
Yes, it's a Protestant denomination.
Oh, okay.
It goes back to Calvin originally.
You know, I can't think of an identity group like when people, they identify as the National Organization of White People, the National Organization of Hispanic, the Black Caucus, or Black this and White that, Hispanic that. I notice that when people get into a group, they don't tend to stand for good. Am I seeing this in the wrong way?
I think that it is possible to stand up for your people in a good and healthy way. I think that it is normal for people to think tribally, if you will. I think there's a very significant statistic about life in the United States, and that is that 95% of the church congregations are at least 85% one race, and many church congregations are 100% one race. What this suggests is that when people are completely free to choose, and nobody, the government's, that's the one institution that the government has not tried to integrate, is church congregations. And when people are completely free to choose, they express a preference for worshiping, and I think also living and working and socializing with people of the same race. I think that's part of our deep human nature. And if we accepted that and tried to build our country on an assumption that that's just the way we are, rather than trying to change human nature, we would be much, much better off.
Two quick questions, because we're running out of time here. Will America stop mass immigration, putting whites in a majority again? I mean, minority.
Even if we were to stop mass immigration, differential birth rates have already ensured that the United States will become a majority non-white country. I think all children under about age 5, whites are already a minority. You have to get to age about 6 or 7 to find age cohorts in which whites are still the majority. So what we're looking forward to is a nation of a large number of old white people and a large number of young non-white people. That's not a very healthy combination either, because those young non-white people are not going to want to be paying Social Security taxes that go primarily to benefit old white people whom they've been told over and over again were just racist oppressors anyway. I see pretty dark days ahead for the United States demographically, even if mass immigration were to be stopped tomorrow.
That's too bad. It's
yes.
Really, so there's no turning around there. It's kind of gone.
Well, it's very hard. I think that
white people don't have babies.
If there is to be a survival of what I think of the original American spirit, which I think is firmly planted in Europe, then the only way to preserve that would be to have enclaves in which whites are the recognized majority. Now, how you would bring that about in contemporary United States is a very difficult question. But unless that happens, then the United States will become increasingly non-white, and whites will be a dwindling and, in many cases, a despised minority, because the prevailing view is that whites are responsible for all the evils of history. If we continue to go down that path, it's not going to be a very pleasant place for white people 50, 60, 100 years from now.
You know, it's so interesting to me. It's very, very interesting that minorities blame white people for all their crap, but yet they come to a country that is founded by whites, that is the greatest country on this side of heaven, as it's whites who made that possible, but yet the people come, they take advantage of the freedom, and then they still blame white people for their failure. It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen since I've been on this side of heaven.
Well, but Jesse Lee, the dumbest thing is that white people will propagate that view.
Yeah.
White people will sit still for that kind of calumny. That's the amazing thing. And it seems to be sort of a generational thing. When Mexicans first come to this country, they're grateful to be here. They're happy to be in a place where they don't have to bribe policemen. They're happy to be in a place where they get paid a living wage.
I need to ask you about
telephone systems work.
I need to ask you about Bill O'Reilly.
The drinking water is fresh.
Hold on,
it's
hold
the
on, Jared.
second generation that gets resentful.
Hold on a minute. Back in a moment. Hold on. Jared, thank you for staying over a little bit here for me. I wanted to ask, it's been reported that Bill O'Reilly of Fox News was dropped. And I wanted what do you think about that happening?
I don't know what to make of that, really. It does sound as though he was boorish around women, but does that mean he should be fired? I have opposing views about that. On the one hand, I don't think men should be boors around women. I don't think they should be boors at all. Does that mean that the most popular man in television should be fired from his job? I don't agree with that either. Of course, his replacement, Tucker Carlson, I think is a great guy, and I think he'll do a good job. But I really don't know what to make of that. What is your view, really? Do you think that's appropriate? I mean, assuming that he did put moves on women in a crude way, do you think he deserves to be fired for that?
No, I don't.
Yes.
What I don't understand about society today, men and women are attracted to one another. You know what I'm saying? Yes. And so when men and women come together, whereas in the workplace, at church, at wherever, school, men and women are going to hit on each other.
That's
and
true.
If women want to be big girls and they want to be in this world with men, they should, as big girls, they know how to say yes, they know how to say no, they know it's normal. What's the problem? How come they got to be? They can just, if Bill O'Reilly did this, I have no idea at all. I'm tend not to even believe it, to be honest. But what's wrong with the big girls that if a man hit on them or a woman hit on a man, why can't they say no or yes? Why does it have to become sexual harassment and all that crap?
I generally agree with that 100%. I don't understand all of this sexual harassment nonsense.
Yeah.
You're right. Men and women are attracted to each other. They're not always attracted to the same individuals of the opposite sex.
Right.
But this is just part of life.
It is.
And I think most men, if they're told no, they understand that no is no.
Yep.
But yes, to take a man's private life like that and say, okay, we're going to professionally disqualify you on account of that just does not sit well with me.
I think that this is another modern day high-tech lynching of a straight, white, conservative man with power. I've seen them do this to Rush Limbaugh. I've seen them, and Bill O'Reilly is a Christian. I've seen them do this to Rush Limbaugh. They did it to Justice Clarence Thomas. And I just think it's another day, it's another, as I said, high-tech lynching of a white, straight, conservative Christian man with power.
My assumption is that he'll probably get another program on another network. I hope so.
Yeah.
It would be terrible if he were just utterly silenced and driven from the airways on account of this.
Yeah.
But that's the way our society works these days. If he had said uncomplimentary things about homosexuals or Muslims or I don't know, there are all kinds of ways that you can be lynched these days.
Yeah.
You can't take a dissident view on a dozen different subjects without being considered unfit for polite society in America today.
Well, men got to start standing up and fighting back. It's time out for laying down and allowing yourself to be accused of all these things and your livelihood taken away from you. Look what they're trying to do to President Trump. Another white, straight, Christian man with power. and they're working overtime to get rid of him. While you had the little girly Obama in there, the worst of the worst, and nothing at all.
That's right. Well, when it comes to male-female relations, to me, insanity on stilts is the idea of putting women in combat.
Yes.
This, to me, is just the most cuckoo idea that I can practically think of. And they stick women out there on the front lines, put them in the trenches, and they're upset if some of the young guys make a pass at them. These are people who are in their most testosterone-driven, sexually crazed years of their life.
Yeah.
And they say sexual harassment. This guy wanted to have sex with me. What in heaven's name do they expect? And the idea that women are going to be out there who are pulling their own weight, just as aggressive, just as strong, just as much killers as men, is insane. It's going to be terrible to any kind of unit cohesion. If you've got some cute girl that everybody wants the girl, and one guy gets her or two guys get her, it is absolute insanity.
It is. Jared, thank you so much for coming on. I enjoyed talking to you.
It's been my pleasure. I so appreciate you giving me this opportunity.
Yes, sir. Have a good week and keep fighting the good fight of faith. We'll talk again.